Well, good morning. This is Jimmy from Stuart Arts. This morning I want to talk about this item I purchased at the Florida Flywheelers show a couple of days ago. This is a Saf-Toy, I guess you call it a power plant toy. And I bought this thing in quite a state of disrepair. I paid $25 for it, and as I later determined, it's really not worth very much money, but I'll have fun restoring this thing. And what this is supposed to be, what it's supposed to be is, typically these little power plant toys, you'd have a boiler here, and the boiler would drive a reciprocating engine, which would in turn turn a pulley, which would then drive a little dynamo. But this toy is kind of interesting because instead of, it actually works in the reverse. So in this section here, there is a little Barber Coleman synchronous motor, a nice little 110 volt plug-in thing, ungrounded, nice toy that they made in the 1940s. Wondered if that would pass muster today. But this little motor actually drives this little brass pulley on the side, and then that in turn drives this larger pulley, and there is an eccentric cam here on this side, and that is a crank for a compressor here. So this crank pin and this piston assembly here is actually was a little compressor is the way this thing was made. So this little brass piston here, where'd it go? Here it is. This little brass piston would be plunged in and out, and this little red container here is not a boiler or a power plant, but is actually a little pressure vessel. And when I took this apart, I found that it had been stuck together with some type of an adhesive. And what was interesting is that the original red paint that was put on this toy in 1948 when this was manufactured was still wet in here. It had mixed with the sealant that they used, and in fact it's still just a little wet touching it here. And it was not cured. It was very, very interesting that after all these years that paint had not cured. But I took it apart, cleaned all the paint off of it. It was solid red, black, greasy, really gross. And I took it apart and I stripped this part of it here, and I'll repaint that. And I've decided to leave this as is. I think that looks pretty good, just the way it is. But the shaft, this shaft actually drives a piston here, and that is actually a little compressor. There was some type of a valve on the inside, probably a little poppet or a check valve of some type. That had come loose, and it was laying down inside here when I took it apart. So that's the only hint of how this thing actually worked once upon a time. But this was actually a little air vessel. It pressurized, and my understanding is that this side actually had some kind of a whistle or a little steam whistle or some kind of a relieving device, so when the pressure reached a certain point it would make a nice little whistling sound. But somebody has removed that, and this is just a little machine nut that's been put in there, and I'm not even sure this is the correct thread. So I'll have to figure out some type of relieving device or whistle for this side. And then on this side, this is a little bit of a puzzle to me. I know that this is a stack. It's supposed to be a stack. It looks like it's about 3/4 inch or so. So I'll find a little piece of tubing to put on there, and then we'll swage that to make it look like it did originally. It has this little brass fitting and just a simple screw in the top. And I cannot figure out what that actually is. I thought maybe it was for testing the device originally, but I can't tell if it ever had a function with this particular toy. So other than that, some of the parts here, like this is the connecting rod here, and it's obviously been remanufactured. When I look at the pictures, I believe that the connecting rod was nothing more than a heavy piece of wire that was bent and went up here into sides of the piston here, and went back and just looped around a screw back here on this eccentric cam here. So I've got this little piece of aluminum. It's obviously been hammered out by somebody and drilled in their garage. And so I laid out a new one here on this piece of brass, and so I'll be machining a new part out of that, and I'll try to figure out how to connect it to the piston, but I've got to sort out how the compressor mechanism is supposed to work. Good news is the little motor runs very strong, no issues there, and I think I have the majority of the parts that I need for this little project. So this is one of those things you do out of love. This is not a great national treasure, but it is a nice American-made toy from the 1940s, and I think it's worth doing some work to bring it back to something that's interesting today. Anyway, I just thought you'd be interested in that little rabbit hole that I fell down into here at Stuart Arts. And this is Jimmy saying, hope y'all have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed this little video. We will have a part 2 down the road, and I'll cover some of the little things that I'm doing here to bring this back to some state of function. Have a nice day. Ah!